are the stories shaping the world this morning and why they matter? In Japan, record torrential rain has turned deadly across Chiba Prefecture and the wider Kanto region, bringing floods, landslide warnings, power outages, and major travel disruption. Reports this morning put the death toll at least 6, with another report saying 8 people had died and about 30 were injured. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a Level 5 emergency warning for heavy rain and landslides in parts of Chiba, its highest alert level, urging residents in at-risk areas to act immediately to protect their lives. The damage is being felt in ordinary neighborhoods as well as major transport hubs. Flooding affected roads, parking areas, and residential districts in Omishirasato City, while officials warned that low-lying areas, swollen rivers, and unstable hillsides remained dangerous across Chiba and parts of the Kanto region, including Tokyo. Nearly 26,000 households were still without power, and dozens of homes were flooded. Thousands of travelers were stranded overnight at Narita Airport after rail and road links were disrupted. For families, workers, and older residents, the immediate challenge is not only escaping rising water, but getting electricity restored, reaching medical care, and finding safe shelter. Japan's emergency systems are experienced with severe weather, but climate-linked extremes are placing growing pressure on local governments, first responders, and infrastructure built for a less volatile era. In the occupied West Bank, residents of Qusra say Israeli settlers are continuing a blockade of the Palestinian village despite the presence of Israeli soldiers. Families described attacks on homes, blocked access roads, and people fleeing after settlers entered the area on Sunday and forced local families from their homes. Aid supporters have tried to bring in water and basic supplies, but residents say the blockade has remained in place. Israeli soldiers were sent to the village to disperse settlers, but Palestinians there say the military has the power to remove them quickly and has not done so. The situation has deepened fear in a community already shaken by violence. Security camera recordings from the area captured dozens of settlers surrounding a home built by a Palestinian-American family while family members were inside. 2.5 weeks earlier, settlers attacked mosques in the village and burned the inside of one. Graffiti left on the blackened facade read, "The land of Israel is redeemed with blood, revenge." For residents, this is not an abstract dispute over territory. It is about whether children can sleep safely, whether families can reach work or school, and whether homes built over generations can be protected. Human rights groups have long warned that settler violence, combined with uneven enforcement by Israeli authorities, leaves Palestinian communities exposed. The immediate need in Qusra is access, protection, and accountability, so civilians are not forced to live under siege. The United States is pressing ahead with a naval blockade of Iranian ports, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying the Navy can maintain the operation indefinitely. Tehran has demanded that the blockade be lifted before reopening the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy shipping routes. Iran has set 6 conditions for reopening the strait, including the end of all sanctions and compensation for war-related damage. Washington is reportedly preparing to send the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS George Washington to the Middle East to relieve the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has been on a 9-month deployment connected to the ongoing war with Iran. Hegseth said the United States would rotate ships in and out and continue the blockade. The military dimension is only part of the story. Long deployments carry real strain for sailors and their families, who face months of separation and uncertainty. Military-focused publications reported that multiple sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln attempted to jump overboard amid burnout and stress. The Navy called those reports completely misrepresented, but the broader issue of crew fatigue remains an important one as the operation continues. The Strait of Hormuz is also central to global energy markets. Any extended closure or military standoff can raise costs for shipping, fuel, and consumer goods far from the Gulf. For households already managing high prices, the risks are practical and immediate. Diplomacy remains the only durable path to reducing the danger of miscalculation. Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Iturup, one of the disputed southern Kuril Islands, has reignited tensions between Russia and Japan. The island is known in Japan as Itorafu and is one of 4 Russian-controlled islands claimed by Tokyo as the Northern Territories. Japan says the islands are an inherent part of its territory and were illegally occupied after World War II. The Soviet Union seized the islands in 1945 and deported their Japanese population of about 17,000 people. The unresolved dispute has prevented Russia and Japan from signing a formal post-war peace treaty for nearly 8 decades. Putin's visit this morning is being read in Tokyo as a political signal at a time when relations between Russia and U.S. allies in the region are already strained. A United Nations spokesperson described the issue as a bilateral matter and urged restraint, responsible action, and avoidance of escalation. A U.S. State Department spokesperson told NHK that the United States has long recognized Japan's sovereignty over the Northern Territories. For former residents and their descendants, the dispute is also a matter of memory, displacement, and identity. For current communities in the region, it shapes fishing rights, travel, trade, and security planning. The constructive path remains one that lowers military symbolism and reopens space for dialogue, even if a final settlement remains difficult. In territorial disputes with deep historical wounds, restraint is not weakness. It is often what keeps communities safe. In Ukraine, the human cost of Russia's war is rising again. A Russian strike hit a residential block in Kherson, leaving residents to sort through destroyed and burned belongings. People described stored food, plumbing fixtures, clothing, and personal items ruined after the attack. For families living near the front lines, these strikes turn ordinary homes into places of loss, where the basics of daily life can disappear in minutes. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine said Thursday that civilian casualties have reached their highest monthly level since May 2022, shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion began. That marks a grim shift after months in which communities had already endured air alerts, power cuts, displacement, and repeated attacks on civilian areas. The figures matter because they challenge any sense that the war has settled into a distant or frozen conflict. Civilians are still being killed and injured, and many more are living with the damage to housing, schools, hospitals, and local economies. In cities like Kherson, repairs are often temporary because another strike may come before families have fully recovered from the last one. Humanitarian workers and local volunteers continue to provide food, shelter materials, medical support, and evacuation help. Their work does not end the war, but it reduces suffering and keeps communities connected. The growing casualty toll underscores the need for stronger civilian protection, sustained aid, and renewed diplomatic pressure to end attacks on populated areas. In Sudan, fighting around El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan state, is putting hospitals and civilians under severe pressure. Armed forces competing for control of the city have targeted or damaged power facilities, key supply routes, and civilian infrastructure. The city has faced attempts at siege, and conditions inside are being described as dire. Hospitals are among the most urgent concerns. Strikes and fuel shortages have disrupted electricity, forcing doctors to rely on generators that cannot run consistently. In one reported case, a generator operated for only about 10 minutes before the fuel was depleted. That kind of interruption can be life-threatening for patients who depend on powered equipment, including premature babies and incubators. For families in El Obeid, the crisis is layered. There is the fear of fighting, the difficulty of finding food and fuel, the danger of traveling for medical care, and the possibility that hospitals may not have enough electricity to keep life-saving systems running. Health workers are trying to keep services alive under conditions that would challenge any modern hospital system. Sudan's war has already displaced millions and pushed large areas toward hunger. El Obeid matters strategically because it sits on routes linking regions of the country, but its people are not strategic assets. They are patients, parents, nurses, shopkeepers, and children. The immediate priorities are civilian protection, humanitarian access, fuel for hospitals, and pressure on the warring parties to stop treating basic infrastructure as a battlefield. In Colombia, rescue workers are continuing to search through rubble after a deadly earthquake, even though the crucial 72-hour window for finding survivors alive has passed. Teams have been pausing in silence to listen for any sign of people trapped beneath collapsed structures. Officials expect the death toll to rise. The heartbreak is intensely personal. One man reportedly drove more than 10 hours after learning that his mother was believed to be under a collapsed home. When he arrived, he learned she had died. She was found with keys still in her hands, a detail that speaks to how suddenly disaster interrupted ordinary life. The first days after a major earthquake are a race against time. Rescue teams must move carefully enough not to trigger further collapse, but quickly enough to reach possible survivors. Once the 72-hour mark passes, the chances diminish, though they do not disappear entirely. That is why teams keep searching, even when hope becomes thinner. For affected families, the next phase is just as difficult. Identifying loved ones, finding temporary shelter, accessing clean water and medicine, and figuring out whether homes can be repaired or must be abandoned. Workers may lose tools, shops, vehicles, or fields that supported entire households. Colombia has experience responding to earthquakes and landslides, and local responders, volunteers, and neighbors are often the first line of help. Their work now is both rescue and care, recovering the missing, supporting the grieving, and helping survivors rebuild with stronger protections where possible. In Yemen, Houthi fighters have intensified an offensive against Yemeni government forces in Taiz province, where fierce clashes have reportedly killed dozens of government troops in recent weeks. The renewed fighting is raising concern that one of the world's longest-running conflicts could enter another dangerous phase. Taiz has long been a central front in Yemen's war. It is a place where civilians have endured siege-like conditions, shortages, damaged infrastructure, and the daily risks of living near active lines of combat. When fighting escalates, the consequences quickly reach families trying to buy food, workers trying to move goods, and children whose schools and clinics are disrupted or closed. Saudi Arabia is reportedly considering support for a Yemeni government counteroffensive to retake the Houthi-held Red Sea coast. Any expansion of fighting near the coast could carry wider risks for shipping, humanitarian access, and communities already facing economic hardship. Yemen relies heavily on imports, and disruptions at ports can translate into higher food prices and deeper hunger. There is also renewed scrutiny of civilian harm. An unclassified Pentagon assessment found that the United States killed 153 civilians in Yemen last year and wounded another 243. Those numbers are a reminder that military operations, even when framed as targeted, can have lasting consequences for families and communities. Yemen needs de-escalation, sustained humanitarian aid, and serious political work toward a settlement. After years of war, many Yemenis are not asking for grand promises. They are asking for safety, food, medicine, and the chance to rebuild normal lives. In the Ukraine war, recent attacks have again targeted energy and grain infrastructure on both sides, raising concern about food supplies, exports, and civilian economic pressure. In the past 24 hours, Russia attacked Ukraine's Izmail port area in southern Odessa, a key route for grain exports. Ukraine hit Russia's Baltic seaport of Ust-Luga, which is also described as a hub for grain exports. The attacks come against the backdrop of Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports, which has prevented some ships carrying grain from leaving the country. Grain is not only a commodity on a balance sheet. It is income for farmers, work for port crews and truck drivers, revenue for local communities, and food for households far beyond Ukraine. When ports are damaged or blocked, the effects can move through global supply chains, especially in countries that depend on imported wheat, corn, and cooking oil. Energy infrastructure is also a frequent target, and the combination of power and port attacks can compound the damage. Farmers may struggle to store crops. Rail and road networks face pressure to move goods that would normally travel by sea. Families face higher prices when supply becomes uncertain. International efforts to keep food moving have helped at different points in the war, but the system remains fragile. The constructive response is practical. Protect civilian infrastructure, maintain export corridors where possible, support repair crews, and keep humanitarian food programs funded. Every shipment that leaves safely can matter for both Ukraine's economy and families in countries facing food insecurity. Finally, Japan has presented Ukraine with a drone and artificial intelligence-based demining system designed to make mine clearance safer and more efficient. The system was handed over in Kyiv by the Ukraine office of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, known as JICA, to the Ukrainian government. Ukraine's emergency service thanked Japan and said the technology would be used to save lives. The system uses a drone equipped with magnetic sensors and optical cameras to survey surface and underground conditions. It operates from a height of about 3 meters, collecting data that is then processed by an AI tool to help map mine locations. The goal is to reduce the risk to deminers, speed up survey work, and make it safer for civilians to return to farmland, roads, schools, and neighborhoods. Ukraine is now one of the most mine-contaminated countries in the world because of Russia's full-scale invasion. Mines and unexploded ordnance can remain lethal long after fighting moves on. They threaten farmers plowing fields, children walking near damaged buildings, utility workers repairing lines, and families trying to return home. Japan said it wants to improve the efficiency and safety of demining work and help achieve a fair and permanent peace in Ukraine. This is a reminder that recovery is not only about weapons or diplomacy. It is also about the slow, technical, life-saving work that allows communities to live again without fear beneath their feet. In a war defined by destruction, tools that protect civilians and restore daily life are a meaningful form of support. Follow for a daily world brief. Sources are linked in the description. That's the world.